Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Rebecca, I'm 45 years old and I used to suffer from multiple sclerosis, but I no longer experience any of the symptoms since starting the carnivore diet just over 2.5 years ago. Today's video has been inspired by recent events in my household. So I am a carnivore, but I also happen to love animals. I'm a massive animal lover and I do have animals of my own. I have dogs and cats and chickens and geese. They bring me a lot of joy and sort of a sense of purpose in my everyday life. And I am moving into, in the coming year, a homesteading lifestyle. That's my plan. And at that point, I will expand my animal family and I will get sheep, maybe a couple of donkeys, maybe even rabbits. So I am surrounded by animals and I haven't yet had to face the reality of killing them for food. That's something which does feel difficult for me, especially when I have raised that animal and cared for that animal and it trusts me. That's something I haven't done yet, but it's something which I do believe is morally acceptable as long as I have given that animal a good life and an ethical death. It's a topic that I think a lot of people don't really want to talk about, especially because there's that dissociation factor. In the Western world, we often don't talk about death. It's kind of brushed under the carpet. And we also, tend to buy our meat from supermarkets where it's all packaged up and sanitized, and we haven't had to deal with the process of how it got there. So it was a sticking point for me when I first started the diet. But as soon as I experienced the benefits of the diet, I had my eyes open to the fact that actually I need meat. It's a reality. That's a reality that I can no longer deny. I wasn't vegan before or even vegetarian, but I guess I did have sympathies towards veganism. Now I understand that veganism is just as destructive to the environment and to animal life because of monocropping and pesticides. And I've come to understand that there's no form of eating which isn't destructive in some way, or it doesn't involve taking a life, even if that's plant life. It's a living thing. It might not have a central nervous system, but it's alive. We don't eat anything that isn't alive. So for me, that basic principle means that it simply can't be avoided, and the best I can do is make moral choices within that and have consciousness about that and gratitude for the animal lives that are ending so that I can eat and thrive as a human. So anyway, I have faced some difficult animal losses and one very, very difficult potential impending loss in the past year. I've lost 2 cats on the road below my house. 2 cats were run over, and one of those cats was an extremely special cat to me. I'd had her for over a decade, and the loss of Poncho was heartbreaking. Then a couple of weeks before Christmas, I lost a goose. Well, actually, I'd already lost a couple of chickens this year. I've started out with 10 chickens and I'm down to 5. So my dog Stanley ate a couple of chickens, but another 2 chickens just vanished one day. They didn't come home to the coop. I don't give chickens names because of how easy it is to love them and then lose them. Chickens are like the crossover species for me, where you could get attached and it isn't wise, because even if you haven't eaten that chicken, a bird of prey might come, or a fox, even if it's in broad daylight, and take them. So, or they could get egg bound. I had one chicken become egg bound and die in my arms, and that was the moment I stopped giving my chickens names. Blanca died in my arms, so my white chicken who laid white eggs, she became egg bound, and I remember standing on my mountain cabin and looking out to sea with Blanca in my arms and as she passed away, and it was very emotional, very intense. And I was like, I'm never again. So my chickens don't have names. I do now have geese. Now, one of my geese, I had 4 geese, I now have 3 geese. One was taken by a fox just before Christmas. Now, I had given the geese names because they were just like a bigger deal than the chickens. Like, what are these creatures? And I've really enjoyed having them. It's been a real learning experience to see how their behavior differs to the chickens, and like how geese and chickens, how you look after them and what their different needs are, as water birds, as birds that can fly, as birds that can defend themselves. That the geese are just, they're quite amazing really, and they're really good lawn mowers. by the way. So I was kind of like, okay, well, I've got these geese. Geese can live for up to 30 years, so maybe I'll just keep them and they'll be my pet geese. So I gave them names. And then the fox came and took one of them, took Geraldine. And I was quite shocked about that. And now I am facing the possible loss of a dog. Now, this is something that is very, very hard to face. Elon, one of my dogs, has been diagnosed with a serious neurological condition called cauda equina, which means that his spine is like completely fused up, compressed, and he can't walk properly. I can't take him for walks anymore. His back legs aren't working and he's in a lot of pain and he's incontinent. So I'm facing the possibility of having to put him down, which is hard. I've had him for 5 years. I adopted him when I first moved to Spain, and he's always been, you know, one sandwich short of a picnic. He doesn't know his name. He thinks it's just a noise that I'm making. He doesn't respond to his name. So he's impossible to train. But he's a sweetheart, you know, he's a really lovely boy. He's not naughty and he's happy, you know, seeing him be happy in the 5 years that I've had him has been very heartwarming, very gratifying. And I just dread the day when I may have to actually end his suffering. It doesn't look like there's much I can do because apparently surgery can actually not really be very effective with this condition. So I'm having to face these losses, and it's kind of been a wake-up call. It's not that I hadn't been aware of the fact that by being carnivore, animals are losing their lives so that I can thrive. Of course, I've always been aware of that, and I've been mindful of where I buy my meat from, so that I buy from local producers that have pasture raised and all of that. Like I've always been mindful of that, although not perfect, I have to say. But where I can, I have bought meat from ethical producers. But I've kind of stopped there. I haven't had to go any further than that. My chickens, I keep just for their eggs. They're egg layers. Actually, they don't sit on their eggs. They are a particular species of chicken, which is just egg layer chicken. So they don't get broody and they don't incubate their eggs. Even though I now have a rooster to fertilize them, they're not sitting on the eggs. So I don't have any chicks. But I have sourced some chickens of a different species, no, not species, breed, so that I can actually start to breed chickens. Now, I've been aware of this coming up, this new step forward in my homesteading lifestyle coming up soon, where I will have chickens that I will eventually slaughter myself. And I think it's an important step for a carnivore. I don't think it's an immoral act, personally. I think that it's, if anything, I feel like my relationship with those animals is going to deepen because I am going to respectfully give them a good life and then consume them. I think it's a world of difference to, like, when I lived on the mountain. I used to live in a mountain cabin and there were lots of hunters on that mountain, and often I would walk past the dead body of a deer with its antlers removed. And you know that the hunters have come and they've shot that deer, it has died, and they've just taken the antlers as a trophy and they've left the body. I do not understand that. Although I know that there is a need for hunting sometimes, these people are basically participating in blood sport for the sake of blood sport and for trophy hunting. I don't think that's okay, personally. I wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't condone somebody doing that. I think it's completely different to eating for your own consumption, as long as that animal has lived a good life. And I do think that there's a distinction between different species of animal. Like, I have had people say to me on my channel, well, why don't you eat your dogs then if you're carnivore? And I'm like, well, because they're dogs. I wouldn't eat a dog, just like I wouldn't eat a human. I do think that it's okay to decide which animals you're okay to eat and which you're not. You know, just because you're vegan, it doesn't mean you eat every plant. You know, do you eat Venus flytraps because you're vegan? It's about preference, and it's also about where you draw the line about what you're comfortable with. And it is a very personal thing. And I also think that different cultures approach it differently. So, like in the UK, where veganism is rife, pets are often treated like children. And in Spain, British people are laughed at for that, for treating their dogs like their children and, you know, dressing them up and what have you, and keeping them in the house, you know, like their children. Whereas in Spain, British people are often quite shocked by Spanish attitudes towards animals and animal rights, because animals are very much utilitarian here. And I feel like both cultures could learn from each other. And I think they are. I think that is what's happening. Certainly in Spain, I've noticed that animal rights are becoming more talked about and accepted. But still, it's still a very animal utilitarian culture, and I think that's something that I do respect within reason. I think as long as the animals are treated fundamentally well, it's okay to have that kind of realistic relationship with them. It's brutal, but it's real. By being carnivore, I'm not numbing myself to the reality. I'm not being cruel. I'm not pretending that an animal's death doesn't matter. I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing it for reasons of health, ecology, ancestry, and honesty about the way the world works. And I feel like that awareness is making me more conscious, more careful, not less. That's why this kind of step into homesteading life and these recent experiences of loss are all contributing to this learning journey for me. You know, facing up to the fact that I lost a goose and I was upset about it, but that potentially I could eat a goose. So I am actually now thinking that alongside getting chickens which will breed and maybe going on a course to learn how to slaughter them as ethically as possible, I may also sacrifice my remaining geese, because they are little buggers and they sometimes do not go in the barn at night. They refuse to. And because they're big, flappy creatures, I can't just pick them up and put them in the barn. So it can be awkward. When they're outside overnight, you know, it's a situation of, you know, may the odds forever be in your favour, and just sort of waiting to see if the fox gets them. And I can put Stanley outside at night and he can bark, but then I won't get a wink of sleep because Stanley will be going around barking all night. And then poor Stanley is exhausted in the morning, and if it's cold like it is at the moment, that's not fair on Stanley. So part of me is like, maybe rather than allowing the fox to have a lovely meal of goose, maybe I should consider getting them slaughtered. And I don't know, it's just made me face up to the fact that I do keep some animals which are part of a crossover species for me, where I do eat them but I also keep them, and that is going to be raised a level when I get sheep. When I keep sheep, they're a mammal and they have cute faces that look like they're smiling, and how am I going to do that? Like, it's going to be really hard. And if those sheep obviously trust me and look at me, like, how will I then eat them? But then how can I continue to be carnivore and pay so much money and not necessarily know the origin of the meat that I'm buying? The more logical, honest step is to do it myself and to know exactly what that sheep has put in its body and how it's lived, and made sure that it's had the most ethical death. On some spiritual level, I feel like we have permission. That's how I feel. Like, I could be wrong, you know, somebody could feel completely differently to me and I would respect that. But what I feel is that in this realm, on this planet, there is a food chain and we have permission to eat animals, because that's how we thrive. And an animal would eat us. And I personally also feel that our bodies are not the end of the story. I feel that consciousness continues after death. Like, that's a spiritual belief that I have, but I completely believe it. I don't know what happens after death, but I don't think that consciousness is snuffed out when our bodies are. That's simply something that I believe, and I have the right to believe, and other people have the right to believe different. But that's also what makes me feel like, well, at the end of the day, it's your intention and your consciousness about these things that ultimately matters. It's about the gratitude you have, the respect you have, and about giving animals a respectful life and honouring them in their death and after their death. I'm not trying to convince anybody in this discussion. I'm just discussing this issue because it's come up in recent times in my life. I've faced animal losses. I love animals. And I am now facing a very difficult animal loss, but to me that's in a different category, and I think that's okay. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I just, as a carnivore that deeply loves animals, part of me is in conflict, and another part of me feels like, well, this is perfect, you know, it's more, my whole life becomes then about animals and about rearing them and about learning about them and deepening my understanding and my gratitude and my respect for them. I'm excited, I'm thrilled at the thought of moving into a homesteading lifestyle, but I'm also a little bit nervous because I just know that I'm a sucker for an animal, a cute little animal. I really am, I always have been, you know, it's not like a substitute for children. I feel like I don't have children, but if I did have children, I'd have animals as well. I just love them. I feel more comfortable around animals than I do around humans. They make me less anxious than humans do. Yeah, so becoming carnivores just made me engage with animals in a whole new level, in a completely different way, and face some really hard truths, not sugarcoat, but also, you know, become a lot more, I think, like a more honest relationship with the world around me, and, you know, not virtue signaling, just honest and straightforward and respectful, and making the most ethical choices that I can within this brutal reality, which is that animals eat each other. So let's do that in the most ethical way possible. And let's do that in the most respectful way possible, with as much gratitude as possible. That's where I'm at with it. It's all about consciousness and intention. Yeah, so that's the reality we face. Like I said, I'm not trying to convince anybody. You're perfectly welcome to have your opposing views, but please do share your views below. I'd be very interested. Even if you're vegan and you hate what I've said, contribute to the discussion. I think it's great, because ultimately I think what we all agree on is that factory farming is awful, and it would be a wonderful thing to bring that to an end. And we can strive to make our carnivore practice more ancestral, more ethical, and more loving. So yeah, I'll end on that note, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.